In 2015, a 4-year-old boy in Detroit began singing Billie Jean with perfect choreography, despite never hearing the song before. His name was Marcus Thompson, and he claimed he used to be someone else. Someone famous. Someone who died in 2009. The Thompson family lived in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. David Thompson, a mechanic, and his wife Sarah, a school teacher, had always considered themselves ordinary people. Their son Marcus was their pride and joy, a bright child who loved drawing and playing with toy cars. But in the spring of 2015, everything changed. It started with the nightmares. Marcus would wake up screaming, clutching his chest, gasping for air. He would cry about not being able to breathe, about doctors and bright lights. The episodes happened 3 to 4 times a week, always between 2 and 3 in the morning. Sarah would find him drenched in sweat, his small body trembling uncontrollably. During these episodes, Marcus would repeat the same phrases over and over. He would say he needed to see his children. He would ask for someone named Lisa Marie. He would beg to go home to Neverland. The Thompsons had never discussed Michael Jackson around their son. They weren't particularly fans of pop music, preferring country and classic rock. The first truly unsettling incident happened on a Tuesday morning in April. Sarah was making breakfast when she heard music coming from the living room. She found Marcus standing in front of the television, which was turned off, performing a flawless moonwalk across the hardwood floor. His movements were precise, professional, impossible for a child his age to execute. When she asked him where he learned to dance like that, Marcus looked at her with confusion and said he had always known how. That same week, Marcus began requesting specific foods he had never eaten before. He asked for soy milk instead of regular milk, claiming dairy made his stomach hurt. He refused to eat meat, saying it made him feel sick. He begged for something called quinoa salad, a dish the Thompsons had never heard of. When Sarah researched these dietary preferences online, she discovered they perfectly matched Michael Jackson's well-documented eating habits. The breaking point came during a family trip to the grocery store. As they walked down the cereal aisle, Marcus suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto a magazine cover featuring a black and white photo of Michael Jackson. The child began to cry, not the typical tantrum of a 4-year-old, but deep, heartbroken sobs. He reached for the magazine and whispered, "That's me. That's my face." Shoppers stared as Marcus continued to weep, saying he missed his monkey bubbles and his home with all the rides. David Thompson was a practical man who believed in logic and reason. He initially dismissed his son's behavior as an overactive imagination, perhaps influenced by something he had seen on television or overheard from other children. But as the incidents became more frequent and specific, doubt began to creep into his rational worldview. Sarah decided to document everything. She started keeping a journal, recording Marcus's statements, his behaviors, and the timing of each unusual incident. She filmed him dancing, capturing movements that seemed far too sophisticated for his age. She recorded him humming melodies she didn't recognize, only to later discover they were unreleased Michael Jackson songs or rare B-sides that weren't available on mainstream radio. The family's pediatrician, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, suggested the episodes might be night terrors or anxiety-related disorders. She recommended reducing Marcus's screen time and creating a more structured bedtime routine. But the changes made no difference. If anything, the episodes became more intense and detailed. Marcus began drawing obsessively. His artwork, previously consisting of stick figures and basic shapes, suddenly became elaborate sketches of a large estate with carousel horses, a Ferris wheel, and exotic animals. He drew a man in a sparkly glove standing next to a chimpanzee. When Sarah asked him to explain his drawings, Marcus would simply say he was drawing his old home, the place where he used to live before he came to be with them. One evening in May, while Sarah was putting Marcus to bed, he grabbed her hand and said something that made her blood run cold. He looked directly into her eyes and said, "Mommy, I died in my bedroom. Dr. Murray gave me medicine that made me go to sleep forever, but I came back to be with you." He then rolled over and fell asleep peacefully, leaving Sarah standing in stunned silence. That night, Sarah researched Dr. Conrad Murray, the physician convicted in Michael Jackson's death. She read about the propofol, the timeline of events on June 25, 2009, and the circumstances surrounding the pop star's final hours. Every detail Marcus had mentioned aligned perfectly with the official reports, information a 4-year-old boy from Detroit should never have known. Posso continuar com o próximo bloco de 7.500 characters? The Thompsons decided they needed answers. In June 2015, they contacted Dr. James Morrison, a psychiatrist at Children's Hospital of Michigan who specialized in unusual childhood behaviors. Dr. Morrison had seen cases of children with vivid imaginary friends or elaborate fantasy worlds. But Marcus's case was different. The specificity and consistency of his claims were unlike anything in his 20-year career. During their first session, Dr. Morrison showed Marcus photographs of various celebrities mixed with pictures of unknown people. Without hesitation, Marcus pointed to Michael Jackson's photo and said, "That's me when I was older." He then pointed to a picture of Joe Jackson and said, "That's my daddy. He was mean to me." Most remarkably, when shown a photo of a young Michael Jackson from the Jackson 5 era, Marcus began to cry and said, "I was so little. I just wanted to play, but I had to work all the time." Dr. Morrison was skeptical but intrigued. He decided to test Marcus further. He played audio recordings of various artists without showing any visual cues. When Michael Jackson's voice came through the speakers, Marcus immediately perked up and began moving to the rhythm. But when the doctor played a rare, unreleased demo from 1987, something extraordinary happened. Marcus began singing along word for word to a song that had never been publicly released and was only known to Jackson's closest collaborators and estate executors. The psychiatrist contacted Quincy Jones's production team to verify the authenticity of the recording. They confirmed that the demo was indeed genuine and part of a private collection that had never been distributed or made available online. There was no way a child in Detroit could have heard this particular song, yet Marcus knew every lyric and vocal nuance. Word of Marcus's case began to spread within the medical community. Dr. Ian Stevenson's former colleagues at the University of Virginia, researchers who had spent decades studying alleged reincarnation cases, reached out to the Thompson family. They were particularly interested because Marcus's claims were verifiable and specific, unlike many childhood reincarnation cases that involve vague or unverifiable memories. In July 2015, the researchers arranged for Marcus to visit the Jackson family estate in Encino, California. The trip was conducted under strict scientific protocols, with multiple cameras recording every interaction. The Thompsons were instructed not to provide any guidance or prompts to Marcus during the visit. As their rental car pulled up to the gates of the Havenhurst estate, Marcus became visibly agitated. He pressed his face against the window and whispered, "Home." When they entered the property, Marcus ran directly to a specific tree in the backyard, one that wasn't visible from the entrance. He sat beneath it and said, "This is where I used to think about my songs." Catherine Jackson, Michael's mother, agreed to meet with the family. She was initially skeptical, having dealt with numerous imposters and conspiracy theorists over the years. But when Marcus saw her, his reaction was immediate and profound. He ran to her, buried his face in her arms, and began sobbing. Through his tears, he said, "Mother, I missed you so much. I'm sorry I left you. Catherine later admitted to researchers that the way Marcus held her, the specific words he used, and even the way he touched her face were identical to behaviors her son Michael had exhibited as a young child. She had never shared these intimate family memories publicly, yet Marcus seemed to know them instinctively. The most compelling evidence came when Marcus was shown Michael Jackson's childhood bedroom, which had been preserved exactly as it was in the 1970s. Without any prompting, he walked directly to a specific corner and moved a dresser slightly to the left. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a handwritten note that read MJ was here 1974. The note had been Michael's secret hiding place for his private thoughts, something only he and Catherine had known about. Marcus spent 3 days at the estate, and each day brought new revelations. He knew which rooms had been renovated and when. He correctly identified family photos that weren't on display. He even mentioned specific conversations between family members that had never been recorded or discussed outside the immediate family. Janet Jackson, who was initially reluctant to meet Marcus, found herself shaken by the encounter. But the most emotional moment came on the final day. Marcus was playing in the backyard when he suddenly stopped and stared at the sky. Tears began streaming down his face. When asked what was wrong, he said, "I remember now. I remember leaving. There was so much light, and I felt so tired. But I didn't want to go. I had so much more music to make." He paused, wiping his eyes. "But then I saw you, Mommy," he said to Sarah. "I saw you and Daddy, and I knew I needed to come back to be your little boy." The Jackson family was divided on what to believe. Some members were convinced that Marcus was somehow connected to Michael's spirit. Others believed it was an elaborate coincidence, or perhaps the result of unconscious influence from media coverage. Quincy Jones, when informed about the case, simply said, "That child has music in his soul that can't be taught or copied." Back in Detroit, the Thompsons struggled with their new reality. Marcus continued to display musical abilities far beyond his years. He could play piano melodies he claimed to remember from his other life. He would critique his own drawings, saying they weren't as good as the songs he used to write. The nightmares decreased after the California trip, but they were replaced by a different kind of sadness. Marcus would often stare out the window and say he missed performing for people who loved his music. Posso continuarcam o proximo bloco de 5.000 characters para completer os 20.000 characters. Dr. Morrison continued studying Marcus for another 6 months, documenting every unusual behavior and statement. The case attracted attention from skeptics and believers alike. James Randi, the famous debunker of paranormal claims, personally investigated the case and admitted he could find no evidence of fraud or coaching. However, he maintained that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and suggested that Marcus might have accessed information through channels not yet understood by science. Child psychologist Dr. Angela Reed offered an alternative explanation. She theorized that Marcus could be experiencing cryptomnesia, a phenomenon where forgotten memories resurface, as if they were new. Perhaps he had been exposed to Michael Jackson content as an infant or toddler, information that his conscious mind had forgotten, but his subconscious retained. This could explain the detailed knowledge and emotional responses. Yet this theory couldn't account for Marcus's knowledge of private family moments and unreleased recordings. The Jackson estate, through their attorneys, confirmed that several pieces of information Marcus had shared were known only to family members and had never been published or discussed publicly. These details included the location of a childhood diary, specific nicknames used within the family, and even the recipe for Catherine Jackson's banana pudding that Michael had loved as a child. As 2015 came to an end, Marcus began to change. The intense emotional episodes became less frequent. His dancing, while still impressive for a child his age, lost some of its professional quality. He started playing with toys more and talking about his other life less. Dr. Morrison noted that this pattern was consistent with other alleged reincarnation cases, where memories typically fade as the child grows older and becomes more integrated into their current life. But some things remained constant. Marcus still refused to eat meat, still preferred soy milk, and still had an inexplicable fear of doctors. He would become visibly distressed when medical professionals entered the room, often hiding behind his mother and whispering about bad medicine. On the anniversary of Michael Jackson's death, June 25th, Marcus would become unusually quiet and withdrawn, though he seemed unaware of the significance of the date. The scientific community remained divided. Researchers who studied consciousness and survival after death saw Marcus's case as potential evidence for reincarnation or some form of consciousness transfer. Skeptics argued that the human brain's pattern recognition abilities, combined with media saturation and cultural osmosis, could create seemingly impossible connections and knowledge. In early 2016, the Thompson family made a difficult decision. They chose to step away from the public attention and focus on giving Marcus a normal childhood. Sarah stopped documenting his behaviors, and David requested that researchers respect their privacy. They wanted their son to grow up without the burden of being a scientific curiosity or spiritual phenomenon. The last recorded interview with Marcus took place in March 2016, when he was 5 years old. When asked if he still remembered being Michael Jackson, he looked confused for a moment, then shrugged and said, "Sometimes I have dreams about dancing and singing for lots of people. But that feels like a long time ago." He paused, then added, "I like being Marcus now. Mommy and Daddy take good care of me." Dr. Morrison published his findings in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, carefully noting both the extraordinary aspects of the case and the limitations of the evidence. He concluded that Marcus's case represented either an unprecedented example of childhood cryptomnesia or genuine evidence of survival after death. The scientific method, he noted, required remaining open to both possibilities until further evidence emerged. Today, Marcus Thompson is 9 years old. According to family friends, he's a normal elementary school student who enjoys soccer and video games. He rarely speaks about his early childhood experiences, and when pressed, he claims not to remember most of the incidents that made him famous. His parents say he still has nightmares occasionally, but they're typical childhood fears about monsters and school tests. The only remaining evidence of his unusual early years is his continued love of music. Marcus takes piano lessons and shows remarkable natural ability. His teacher notes that he seems to understand complex rhythms and melodies intuitively, as if he's remembering rather than learning. Sometimes, when he thinks no one is listening, neighbors report hearing him humming melodies they don't recognize, but somehow find hauntingly familiar. Whether Marcus Thompson experienced genuine memories of a past life or demonstrated an extraordinary case of unconscious information absorption may never be definitively proven. What remains undeniable is that a 4-year-old boy from Detroit possessed knowledge and abilities that challenged our understanding of consciousness, memory, and the nature of identity itself. In a world where science struggles to explain the full spectrum of human experience, Marcus's story reminds us that some mysteries may be more profound than our current ability to comprehend them.